Can you give us a kind of, couple 100-word précis before we dig into it of what you're about?
It's impossible, isn't it?
No,
I'm somebody who's interested in sound and have been since the earliest memory, but also for me, it's always related to how we see the world, how we hear the world, how we read the world. So words have played as much importance to me as books have been as important to me as music. Music has been important to me as going to visual art exhibitions, as has performance, contemporary dance, theatre, all these things. So when I was a teenager, I absolutely knew what I wanted to do, which was to be in this place where all these things intersect, exactly. But there's no job that you can apply to do this. I just ended up in a position where these things thankfully speak to each other and communicate. And my place in the world is making those kind of connections still. So whether it's me physically doing it, or it's me attending things where other people are doing this, or trying my best to encourage these things to happen, that's what's important. So that's kind of me. The key focus for many people probably has been sounds that I've made. But equally, I'm an ideas person, and ideas can transfer equally between all the arts and beyond the arts through to science and medicine and all kinds of things. So that's me.
Kind of an artistic synesthesia, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a difficult word to say still, though, isn't it? Synesthesia, I still struggle with it. Yeah.
You to say, and difficult for me to say,
yeah. But no, it is. I mean, in some ways, it's finding those connections and building those relationships. I mean, the joy of getting older, apart from arthritis and all those wonderful things. No, the joy of getting older is being able to understand the relationships between things all the more. When you're younger, you're kind of discovering that, and you're still discovering it when you're older. But it's understanding how these things talk to each other becomes really enlightening and really inspiring, I find. And constantly reading books, interviews with artists, watching videos, etc. That sense of discovery keeps me going. I'm a big kid, and I get very, very excited about new possibilities in my head that have been around for generations, but I didn't know about.
It's very inspiring, isn't it? Because I mean, I see the world in a similar kind of fashion. And I apportion equal weight to all the different art forms like you, really. Whenever I'm feeling uninspired compositionally, I generally head to an art gallery or an installation, but it doesn't have to be to do with sound. It's just something to jiggle up the tiles and see if we can, or, shake the box of the jigsaw and see if you can find a different combination.
I mean, to be truthful, yeah. I mean, I buy far more books than I do records or CDs. I mean, today, something like 7 new books arrived in the post this morning already, and there's another 3 on the way. But they're all different kinds of things. They're rarely novels. They're usually non-fiction. They're usually art-oriented or music-oriented books.
What's arrived today?
7 books by a French artist called Laurie Anderson, who is an extraordinary character who's been making work for years, and it's a collection of many of his different catalogues I just got in the post. And then there is a book on esoteric painting coming tomorrow, and a history of a 1960s kind of fanzine that's coming in the next couple of days as well, and other things,
It's overwhelming. So how did it all start? I mean, what led you to this from the very start when you were growing up?
I have no idea, in a way. I come from a very normal, in a way, I read your book, Martin, so I kind of know your upbringing. I come from a very normal working class family. All of my family, every single person was basically either a cleaner or a painter and decorator. So the most normal British family. And there was nothing fancy. We listened to music, we watched TV, all those kind of things. But I was always the slightly quirky one. I was always interested in the things that were more unusual. If I would, for a good example, I remember we had a history of art book at school. And I remember seeing a photograph of an artist And it's a picture of him, and it's a black and white photograph, and he's holding his head, something like this. And underneath his handwritten, "I'm too sad to tell you."
Oh.
And it's an incredibly powerful image. And so I looked into it, and it's an artist called Bastian Ader. And Van Ader disappeared. He went on a sailing trip as an art project from one coast to another coast, I think in the US, and disappeared. Clearly he drowned somewhere. And so there's a kind of romantic, melancholic story about him, but I had no idea of that. But I remember seeing this image, and at the same time I saw an image of the German artist Joseph Beuys. And this is a man who led a life of visual arts, but also was connected with sound, but also through education. He was very keen on an idea of the Free University in Germany. And I just saw this photograph of this man with his head covered in gold foil from the 1960s, early 70s, and it was called Explaining Pictures to a Dead Hair. And, you know, you have these moments, and you're something like 13, 14 years of age, and you see these images, and you have no idea what they mean, what they connect to, or anything. And at the same time, I was discovering music and discovering weird and wonderful music. And I picked up a book in a secondhand store about the history of literature, and it described different books. And whenever a book was described as being the most challenging book, the most difficult, I thought, I have to read this. I have to find this out. And so it led me on that kind of journey. So I've been, you know, many of the connections I've had have been completely chance encounters that have come from these moments. But I was always very conscious that I was slightly different in a way.
Yeah.
You know, I was never, I've never been interested in an idea of making a product and making a living from that product in a way. So I've been involved in music, and I've always described the CDs from the very first, or the first releases, described the CDs and records as a way of saying, hey, I'm still here, I'm still alive. But they're not there to challenge the pop charts. They're not there to make a living through sales. They're almost like a broadcast. And they say, I'm here at this moment. This is what I've been doing. If you're interested, that's great. Tune in. If not, that's perfectly fine. So an idea for me of trying to make a living from that side of things was never really of interest, which is disturbing when you speak to publishers and things like that, because they would always ask you questions. What were your sales like of this record?
Oh yeah, no, I've given up with that shit now. That's what it
Exactly.
even means anymore.
Yeah, and kind of the meaning behind that wasn't of interest to me. I was interested in almost beyond. It was the ideas that emanated and resonated through all this work that excited me so much and continue to excite me, you know, at the age of 95 here. So.
You have an immense depth in your work.
Oh.
But also you've got a cheeky, you know, kind of renegade spirit as well. And I think that is a very engaging trait.
Oh.
Because I think there's something about me, artists that take themselves a bit too seriously, for me, put me off a little bit. I like people with a, you know, like Dali, you know, who it was clearly some of it was meta. What would he call it? He'd call anyway. It was like the next level of irony, you know, and
yeah, absolutely.
And I've always loved that kind of art. What do you guys think, Cherub, Tim?
Well, after having done such a deep dive into all of your eclectic works through all of your time on Earth, it's so inspiring for me, and it's almost like in a way like building sonic architecture, and you're building these sound houses for people to move through and experience life in all these different ways, and it teaches people how to listen differently and how to observe and be in the world differently. I love your concept of found sound. That's something that I've never come across before, never even put those two words together. So I want you to tell me more about that process. I know that in your early works you were blending phone cell receptions and police scanners and that's hence where your name Scanner came from. I think that is so interesting and not the kind of out of the box thing you see so much these days. So tell us more about your creative process there and how you arrived at that.
It's funny, as you talk about that, when I was a teenager, I had an old-fashioned reel-to-reel machine, you know, with tape. And as Martin would well know, that you can make tape loops, which means instead of a piece of tape going from one reel to the other and just playing a piece of music, you can record something and it goes into a loop. And depending on how long that tape is, it means that piece of sound plays for that length of time. So if you have a piece of tape that's very short, you can make a sound that goes da-da-da-da, and it will just keep going da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. If you have a much longer tape, as I did, and put it around my bedroom, around milk bottles and things, so it'd extend the tape, I could have over a minute of sound. So what I used to do as a teenager was hang a microphone out of my bedroom window, hit record, and it would just record the sounds out my bedroom window. So it would be somebody walking past, a car, the postman, the gate opening and closing, and I'd leave it running for hours. And I'd never keep that. And the next day I'd hit record and record over it again. And it was a kind of homemade ambient sound. You know, what it did was something that's a real sense of discovery for many people. If you ever wear headphones and you have a recorder and you press record, the world comes alive. It's like you strike a match and everything is suddenly ignited. It's phenomenal. So you can walk around the streets that you live in all the time. As soon as you put a pair of headphones on with a microphone and you start to listen, everything is amplified. It's like you're fine-tuning into the world around you. It's so magical to do it with people who've never done it before. It's so liberating. And I was doing those kind of things, and I discovered that on the old rotary telephones, you know, the ones where you'd go, if you hit the two buttons at the top, you could get a cross line. So I used to hit the two buttons, get a cross line, and listen to my neighbours or anybody else in the local area in South London. And I used to record those. And
You're a sleeping Tom.
basically, yeah.
I'm not sure how legal that is these days.
No, but in a way, it wasn't about information. It wasn't about. It was a curiosity about how we communicate with each other. It was a curiosity about how we act all the time. I mean, we're all performing now in a way, you know, and it's when you step away from those levels of performance, even just walking out and going to the shop is some kind of performance. I was interested in what's the reality of how people really are when they are really with each other, when you're in such an intimacy. And so what intrigued me was being able to have access to that level of intimacy, which no one can ever have access to in a way. So the first scanner works were entering those worlds, picking up these random figures, these random voices in an area, pulling down these indiscriminate signals from the ether and just discovering the stories. It didn't matter who the people were. I wasn't interested in who the people were, but what their stories were and how they spoke to each other. And one thing we can never do in life, well, today we can, but we couldn't, is listen back to a conversation we once had. You know, so Martin and I may have been on a train coming from Newcastle to London many years ago, and we had an amazing conversation. He did some fantastic impersonations, I remember, with accents, but I can replay it in my memory, but there's no recording of that.
I think you got the wrong Martin there.
No, it was you. You did some great accents.
You want to hear the accents? What have you got?
Oh, yeah. No, you did like Durham or something like this. You did some really good Newcastle accents, I remember. So
Oh yeah, I was spending a lot of time in Newcastle.
exactly.
You've a lot.
And but you know that's a story that's in your memory, and what this allowed me to do was store those memories in a way, store those stories. Imagine I'm the person who's kept a diary since he was 12 years old. I've never missed a day. I still have them all, and I don't look through them. But every day has been recorded like that. I've always been somebody who's fascinated by that level of detail, of storing information. And the early works are that kind of thing. They're almost a picture of a place at a time. So the early CDs and then records were of London, in South London. But when I started to travel, there were recordings that there's a live concert in New York. So the voices are from New York. There's another one in Paris. So it's Paris at that moment in time in 1995, 96. And those conversations happening in real time, and that level of kind of intimate exposure in a way, taking these intimate moments and exposing them to a wide audience, but trying not to feel like I'm exploiting those people in a sense. And it kind of began at a very early age, you know, just playing with tape recorders, playing with technology. And in fact, I would argue that in fact it was the technology that made me who I was in a sense. You know, it's...
Oh, you are an android, obviously. You're not...
Yeah, exactly. But it was having things like small tape recorders that my brother and I had a small disposable tape recorder in the 1970s. And we didn't just record things. Well, I recorded things like Spider-Man off the TV before video recorders were around. And I'd listen to Spider-Man so I could picture them because I'd seen the episodes, so I knew it in my imagination. But we used to do things like record an hour and a half of football matches and just listen to the sounds. And there would be moments, and I still have these tapes, where my mum would come in and say, "Would you like a biscuit?" And, 9-year-old Robin would say, "I don't want a biscuit. My brother has more biscuits than me." And we'd have these kind of arguments, and it's all on tape. It's extraordinary. So, in a way,
sound, please, Mum.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So it was all the kind of, in a way, it was the technology that lent itself to me thinking in the way I've been thinking, which I find really quite magical,
It's such a unique approach, and it really makes sonic poetry out of just everyday noise, which again will encourage people to listen to the world differently.
And I'm certainly, I'm far from the first person to consider working in this way, but I wasn't aware of that work when I was a teenager. Later on, there were composers, a French composer called Pierre Schaeffer, who set up a school of music and sound in Paris. And his work was all about the sound of the city, but I had no idea what that was when I was 12 and 13, 14 years old. There was Queen and Gary Glitter and ABBA and this whole world on the radio. And I wasn't really interested in that. I was seeing what else was possible. As Martin will testify, you have a piece of technology. There weren't videos you could learn how to use things. So you just would kind of play and see what you discover through it. You'd press and turn knobs and buttons, and this sound would emerge. I never had the access to any of that stuff, those electronics. I had cheap tape recorders, but equally they offered me access to record in a world and store in a world. In fact, I used to record my school friends. We used to make all kinds of collages together. And the magical thing is, here we are many, many years later, and I still have those recordings. And I love the fact that I can step back in time to 1980 and listen to those.
I've got an idea for you. Firstly, you need to release your diaries or an edited version of them.
I'd read them.
I mean, I'm fascinated with artists' diaries anyway. I mean, the Diary of a Genius by Salvador Dali, just fantastic. But there's been Jean Cocteau's diaries are incredible. I don't know if I read those. You probably have. You read them by the sound of it. So I think you should do that. And secondly, if you did an audiobook, you could incorporate some of those recordings as a kind of ambient soundtrack to. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? I'd go and buy that.
It is fascinating to think that I can actually look at my diary and think 1982, I went to Berlin for the first time, and then I can find the recording of me going to Berlin and listen to me walking through town, the sounds of the pilot saying the plane has landed, me checking into my hotel. There are only sort of 3 hours of recordings, or they're all just, you pause the tape, you record something else. But it's funny to think I could potentially go back, but I'm always moving forward. That's my challenge. I'm always trying to do all the many different new projects rather than spend my time, looking back. Maybe somebody else needs to do that and think through that when I'm no longer here.
I wish I'd done it in my own life. I can't believe I didn't think of it. I'd love to listen back to the golden years of my 20s now.
Well, 5 years ago, isn't that
what I did in the 80s? No photos, nothing. Thank God.
Hidden archives.
A phrase just occurred to me, which I thought I'd better say before I forget it, is that you are a kind of benevolent, ego-free god in your own mythical world.
Wow, get that on your Wikipedia.
I'm going to get that on a T-shirt. Let me now immediately.
All right, you'll be able to take it down from the transcription.
Yeah, true.
Tim, do you have anything to say?
Well, I do probably, but I'm fascinated to listen. Amazing story, Robin, and fascinated to hear you. Actually, what occurs to me, I'm going to delve into you, but you're polar opposites to the way I think. Actually, so I'm absolutely enchanted by what you're saying, and I agree with Martin. I think I could listen to you actually, because it's partly why I'm lacking questions. But what I was thinking, obviously you're very aware and turned on by the external world, and I love that aspect of all the ambient sounds around you. What turns you on emotionally? Are there streams and stratas of music that really speak to you, you know, beyond what we're talking about the way we're expressing ourselves, but what actually speaks to you? What could bring you to tears musically?
I think it's quite straightforward. I mean, yesterday I literally listened to Foray's Requiem, a piece of music I've grown up with, and it's one of my favorite pieces of music, Nick Drake records, which are embedded in my memory in a way. I remember discovering Nick Drake in 1974, 75 when I was 9 or 10 years old, and it was played on a local radio station in London. And you couldn't find the records. They were really hard to find, I remember. And I remember going to what was then the Virgin Megastore on Oxford Street, which is now a huge shopping, cheap shop. And I remember buying these records, and they still are embedded. I remember when my father died, I remember listening to Nick Drake. I remember when my grandfather died, listening to Nick Drake. And they have this relationship. And in fact, there's just been a reissue of one of his albums in this kind of elaborate box set recently. And listening to it is both a form of time travel and kind of memory retrieval in a really special way, but incredibly powerful. So, I mean, I'm a sort of great romantic melancholic in a way. I thrive on works that have an emotive quality to them. The work I make often has an element of melancholy to it. It's often quite emotive. And one ambition with work that I make has been a notion or idealistically to actually move someone to tears, to make a piece of music that really, really can affect you, that can go beyond the thought process and strike you right in the heart.
Yes.
Way, you know. And, you know, there are composers, Alfred Schnittke, a Russian composer, has written pieces like that, Arvo Pärt, this Estonian composer. You know, there's music that I've grown up with that has this raw passion to it that just kind of breaks me apart in a sense. And I think it's really important to admit that kind of vulnerability. It's really, really helpful. It's not helpful to be just to hide all this stuff, you know. I'm very open about it.
Also, it's important not to over analyze everything. So it takes it away from the kind of
completely
emotional side of what's going on. I just want to move into, you've done a significant amount of stuff in a sense to do with healing. The most famous one is the piece that you did for the, just briefly describe it for us, because you do it so beautifully. I know we did it on the last podcast.
Oh, yes, yeah. The Salle de Depart in Paris. So, yeah. So I was invited to make a permanent sound piece for what in French translates as the departure lounge. It's the room where you bid farewell to a loved one. It's a luminescent blue space designed by Ettore Spalletti, an Italian architect and designer. And it's a space where you spend the last 20 minutes with a loved one. So it's a unique space. It's a place where you don't want to be, you don't anticipate being in, because it's a place where suddenly maybe one of your loved ones has died in a car crash or whatever it may be, some horrendous thing. But you're suddenly in an environment that you don't want to be in. So the soundtrack, for want of a better word, it's almost like a painting, was designed to offer a buffer against silence in a way. It's a piece of sound that plays at an extremely low volume that if you were to take it away, you would know it had been there. But whilst you're there, it just offers a presence. It includes things like footsteps, a recording of me in Denmark with a paddle in the water on a boat. It includes my voice reading different prayers very, very, very quietly. And so it's this very immersive piece, and it runs there permanently in the hospital. And it's a strange thing, because I've made a lot of projects now where we can't talk of an audience. It's the wrong word to use. You know, this isn't an audience I'm talking to with the sound. It's writing into the void in a sense. It's, I mean, the best way of describing it in a most graphic way is when my mother died, I had to go to a hospital in Tooting in London and instruct them to switch off her life support. When they switched off her life support, then it was my brother and I, and they brought this curtain around us to give us privacy because it's just in a public ward. And they gave us a radio which was tuned to something like Happy FM. And at that moment, we did not want to listen to Rod Stewart, you know.
Never. Forever.
Most time, perhaps. Yeah, let's not get into that conversation. But basically, just wasn't correct. It wasn't right that our farewell moments, the last 8 hours as my mother basically slipped away, were being illustrated and by this level of entertainment, which was this disposable stuff. And so the idea of the one in Paris is to offer something deeper, more meaningful, and more emotive in a way. And people use it. And I've had the most extraordinary letters from people who've thanked me for that, because it just gives you a presence. You're not in a silent room, which is why they give you the radio in an NHS hospital, because the silence is the worst thing, because all the beeping of the machines goes away. So you're just sitting there in this moment. To be truthful, you can't think in those moments either. Your thought process is completely warped and wonky. So, that project was a great success, and subsequently 2 other hospitals got in touch and said, invited me to do something similar. And I said, no. Number one, I didn't want to be known as the man who writes music for people who don't want to be in places, for these kind of environments, which is a challenge. I just said, look, use the same thing if you want to. Just use the same work. It's perfectly fine. It's not designed for a commercial purpose. It's there to act. And again, it's a bit like an atmosphere. That's all it is. But it seems to work.
Perfume.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But it serves a purpose, and it seems to have worked. And it continues to this day, which is extraordinary. Some 23, 24 years it's been running there.
Can we hear it? Can we? Well, we got to.
There's a version of it on my Bandcamp. There's a kind of slightly different mix. But obviously, to listen to it, you need to listen to it at an artificial volume, in a way. The best way to listen to it is at a volume that's so low that only if you switch the power off and it disappears, you realize it was on. So it's a bit similar to having a washing machine on at the back of your house, or somebody doing road work a kilometer away or something. It's when it's no longer there, it was there. That was one of the key things about it.
Yeah, we had we were commissioned to do a piece during a conference, actually, in the Manchester Science and Technology Museum, and we were commissioned to create a 3D soundscape that was on very low, like you're describing, in the background while all the speeches were going on and the presentations, based on triggered sounds from people meeting each other, the proximity of RFID tags. Everybody had one on.
Mm.
That would trigger a sound in the correct physical location in the rest of the entire museum.
Amazing.
It was like a kind of heat map of connections, and this would build up over time. So it started off with just the odd blip and plop, and go, what the fuck is that? And then over time, it would kind of evolve into this amazing random thing that indicated how the conference was working. And at one point there was a technical problem, so we had to shut it down to reboot. And as soon as the very second we shut it down, people came to us and said, "What have you done?" Who weren't even aware it was on. They said, "What? I don't know what's changed, but something's changed. I don't like it. What is it? What have you done?" And I explained to them what had happened, and they thought, what they couldn't believe. So I really believe in this kind of very subtle approach to ambiences. I mean, provided, I think, that there is a significance to the sounds.
Of course.
It's no good having fucking whale song in Selfridges, it's and actually part of what we proposed over the years is, to particularly things like retail stores and what have you, is that they can really do something creative and interesting in those spaces to kind of create a kind of miasma, sonic miasma, which can bring together everything, even a branding sense. If you want, didn't always have to be for some esoteric purpose.
Sonic miasma.
Miasma, you can have that one for nothing. Yeah.
Thanks.
So let's talk about, have you had any experience of creating, I'm sure you have, but experience of creating like drone-based music? Because this keeps, I think, you've been in all our discussions on the significance of drone.
It's funny, I made a piece back in 2007 at the Walkergate Hospital in Newcastle, and you can do it better than me, Martin. And that was it was a permanent piece. It's meant to be a permanent piece, but I haven't heard from them since. Maybe they didn't like it.
Okay.
But it was a piece. It's a hospital that specializes in brain injuries and spinal injuries. And I made a series of pieces, both with light and sound, that were about healing in a way. The idea was, rather than somebody just going through different kind of manipulations, the idea was to be able to use this swimming pool that it was connected to, that they could have water therapy, but with these sounds, but the speakers were also embedded in the walls of the pool, so they come through the water as well. And I did sort of research at the time in kind of early internet days of what frequencies would work best in terms of, resonating the body, in terms of healing, but also beyond an idea of healing, it was about offering a space for kind of contemplation. It was a space that allowed people who had some kind of brain injury, that it was about stepping back and not forcing them into any position, but a kind of passive position where the sound would kind of envelop them in a way. And the lighting was designed to follow the sound in a way. It's a very sophisticated system that I got a guy to help develop for me. I do know that shortly after it opened, I had complaints from nurses who were upset that money had been spent on art and not medical services. And I understand that from a certain point of view, but also what had happened was they commissioned paintings and things in the space, which I could see might not offer the same level potentially of solace or inspiration or help. But my piece was very consciously designed to offer that. But it's interesting because I've been thinking about this recently, because I've noticed that since COVID pandemic days, the amount of releases that I hear where people are exploring drones has increased exponentially. It's phenomenal. I mean, honestly, I have this small radio show and happens once a month. So people send me music, and almost 2 out of 3 recordings are drone works, which is interesting. And I wonder, in some sense, whether that whole experience, the challenges of the pandemic and everything it brought with it, both emotionally, intellectually, physically, this has come from it. I mean, I'm just suggesting something I've been thinking about recently, that, that interest in offering a space, because drone work means you are free to enter at any point. You can work with binaural rhythms. You can work with all kinds of things within this. There's all kinds of things one can do. And I mean, probably the most active one I know is the one in New York by Lamont Young, the American composer. If you've been to his dream house, and you climb up a staircase in New York into his apartment, basically, and they have this, what looks like I can only describe it as you went to a footballer's bedroom. It's a white kind of plush carpet, the kind of thing you don't really see unless you have one of them at home. I apologize in advance, but this big white fluffy carpet, and there are enormous, gigantic speakers in the space that are playing these frequencies. And as you enter, and the idea is you lay down ultimately, as you enter, they're literally just going, and as you move your head around, you start picking up extra frequencies, and you kind of start living inside it. And it's the most phenomenal thing. And it's a permanent 24-hour piece. In fact, one of my best friends used to live next door, and told me many stories about living next door, how it drove them crazy in the end, because this thing is in their lives 24 hours a day. But, I love that notion of how something like that a simple drone can lead you in, just by moving your head, you can find these other sounds, these other tones, it's extraordinary use of sound in a simple way.
Yeah, it's the spaciousness of it. And maybe that's the connection through the pandemic, is the confinement that everybody felt, and you can almost escape and lose yourself in drone music.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who were just making music had a chance during the pandemic to just start playing. Perhaps they had a 9-to-5 job, and they felt rewarded, because you're at a time where you're super alone. Quite often you're isolated, and you have this comfort of this bath in a way. There's no other way to put it. This kind of sonic drone bath to sit in, even if it's on your headphones in your own home. And I think perhaps what's happening is a lot of that is now emerging, or it's followed through from people exploring that during the pandemic, and now they've kind of followed through. I could be just making this up in my head, but I've just picked up on a lot of this stuff coming through.
I think the analogy is sitting by a lake and looking at the ripples. You know, it's like a kind of carrier frequency, which kind of sets a baseline for reconfiguring your mind. So it's just hypnotic. It's kind of an eraser of circular thoughts. That's what it does for me. I mean, I was trying to think when I was growing up, what the first drone thing I really fell in love with. I think it was Terry Riley and C,
Mhm.
but also things like obviously and No Pussyfooting and Robert Fripp and Frippatronics and all that stuff. But it always seemed a bit esoteric then to me, and didn't seem. I liked it, but it was kind of like, what's it for? I see a world where there's an exponential rise in the need for therapy and connection. I think drone is another thing. If you put a load of people in a room and play them some drone music, they will synchronize.
I think as well, musically, it's a means where people can come very much into themselves. And without the development of other melodies and harmonies, it's a very grounding thing. And oddly enough, I saw a little thing on Delius recently, and they were talking about the way his music didn't again expand. It was just little pockets of harmonies and everything sort of segued together. And it has a similar effect. I don't think it allows your brain to go into too many other regions. It allows, as you say, this focus and this almost meditative state. Come home. So within the pandemic, I could actually see that very, very much. Plus, it's relatively easier to sort of exercise at the very beginning as a musician, because you don't have the complexity of development. On that, I wanted to ask you, actually, Robin, did you learn an instrument when you were younger and play it, etc.? And do you still?
I learnt to play the piano, learnt to read music when I was about 10 and 11. So we had a cheap upright piano at home, the kind of thing you'd see in a Western, almost like in a bar. And we hired it, and it would cost 50 pence a lesson, I remember. And then suddenly one day the piano disappeared because my mum couldn't afford to rent it anymore. So I used the one at school, and I still have a recording of a piece I made when I was about 14, a soundtrack to a little film we made at school. And it's me playing the piano really poorly and singing like a choir boy. And so I learned to do that. And then I taught myself to play the guitar. I thought I'm interested in the guitar, so I just got books from the library. I did two things. I learned to touch type, which I realize now has been a great skill. I'm really glad I learned to do that as a teenager.
Me too.
And excellent. And I learned the piano and guitar. So guitar literally from just books, tutorials, learning majors, minors, sevenths, all these kind of things. Do I use it still? Well, the guitar I can still play reasonably well, and keyboards not so well. Everything I do ends up in A minor or C minor. They're the keys I kind of hang around in, which is quite handy if you ever want to do like a mix of most of my works. They all tend to fit within the same.
At least you know what the keys are. There's more than me.
Oh yeah, it's quite handy. But I mean, it's one of those skills that I have a decent ear. I've got quite a good musical ear, so I can generally find things quite quickly, And I think, even if you haven't studied music, you can pick up on things very quickly. So I'm very, very strong at improvisation in a way. I can join in very, very fast with people in a good way. I can also add some great bum notes if I want to, and a kind of Les Dawson piano.
When it's jazz, just
pretend it's jazz, exactly.
Yeah,
I was in the modal scale, man. I was in the modal scale. You can say these kind of things, and people go, "Yeah, cool."
No, I was leading you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Oh. I was always going to say improvisation. I was getting a sense of very much it's sort of eleatoric, it's sort of music, etc. How does that convert to your work with dance? Because I'm curious how the dancers receive and then obviously respond to that.
It's interesting. I mean, dance has been a constant in my kind of professional career. I've now written just over 75 works for contemporary dance. And that's even in length pieces that are 90 minutes long through to 20-minute pieces, 15-minute pieces. What I learned quite early on is really interesting for me, which is that the structure of contemporary dance often comes from the music. It's quite interesting. They haven't started choreograph until they receive the music. And I did a great piece, I thought, in London a few years ago, in Waterloo, in a theatre. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember. With Rimbaud Ballet and Australian choreographer called Lucy Guerin. And it was a piece which was a reverse version of a Shakespeare play. It was played completely in reverse, but through contemporary dance. And she just said, I want something rhythmic. And what I decided to do, I have all these, you can kind of get an idea of these sort of machines behind me. I built up pulses that sit in the same register, in the same tempo for 30 minutes. And then I wrote pieces for real musicians, people playing real instruments, violin, a guy playing a bow in the saw, this kind of, who needs it when I can make the sounds? And a couple of wind players. So I wrote this music, had it scored for them. And so during the piece was great. So I was running the electronics and the players would just play when they felt like playing with the score. So the electrics would start going, this really gentle kind of percussion things, and it would build up and come down. And the strings and everything would keep appearing. So we called them like clouds. That was the idea. So they just kind of appear like a cloud of sound and disappear again. And that was great. But it's interesting because it led through to probably my favorite piece I've made for contemporary dance, for a piece called Split, which again was with the same choreographer. She, as often happens, you have a conversation, and she said, do you have anything lying around I could use? And I had this one little clip, about 2 minutes long, that literally just goes, dum, 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 dum. It's this pulse that kind of opens and it flowers and it closes again. And she said, I love this, but can it be an hour long? So basically we just glued it together so it becomes an hour long. And it's the most extraordinary piece. You can see a clip of it online. It's called Split, and it's with two dancers. And they begin the stage at either end, full dance stage. And then they pause after a few minutes and they run a tape across the middle of the stage and they dance in that half of the stage. And after a while, they tape it off and they dance in that quarter of the stage, and so on till at the end of the hour, not to really spoil the story, they are literally dancing like this, so close to each other. But one is clothed, one is naked. But first of all, it's a bit shocking to see a naked dancer, two women, and a fully clothed dancer. But after a while, you stop looking. You don't. But what you notice is the relationship of the bodies, and it's a really beautiful piece. But the one thing no one's ever noticed is that it's just 2 minutes long, and it just loops.
Right.
It's so seductive. So I'm a great kind of reductionist, minimalist in what I do, and that's as minimal as it can probably get, in a sense. This singular sound just running in a loop and opening and closing over a sort of 60-minute duration. But I find it really rewarding working with movement and dance and performers because I don't understand it, in a sense. I don't understand the language. And I love to see how somebody physically responds to something that I've made. It's such a joy,
Oh, it really is.
yeah, it's such a revelation. You walk into a space and you see them responding, and it's a joy, actually. And then what I very much like the fact that people come along to a dance work not because of the composer. They come along because they're interested in the choreographer, the story, the dancers, whatever it may be. So not that I'm secondary, it's an equal relationship, but there's a sense of discovery. So as a teenager, I used to go to quite a lot of contemporary dance because I was very much a Merce Cunningham, John Cage fan. So I went to see every time Cage and Cunningham came to London from the age of about 14 or 15, I went to the shows. And so, I was one of those rare people going just because of the music, probably. Other people were going because they were in awe of the choreographer.
Well, that makes two of you, because when Tim takes me to the Royal Opera House, to the ballet, he picks the seat that is directly above the orchestra. You can't see the stage. And I did ballet when I was a kid. So I was like, Tim, at the interval, do you mind if I go and move over there to that spare seat so I can see the ballet dancers? He's not interested. He's here to actually see and hear the orchestra. It's very inspiring. So that's
Brain- When the proms are on, I always buy a ticket in the choir behind the orchestra.
Yes,
I
we've
can
been
watch,
there too.
so I can watch the face of the conductor, and the sound is best there, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Royal Festival Hall, Tim, we sit in the choir seats as well, don't we?
Oh, how funny.
It's not comfortable, but it is made.
Yes, all of that. And you can't fall asleep, Paul.
It would be funny.
You're on public display, that's for sure. Do you go to concerts, Robin, or do you go to other media events? I mean, I'm curious because I'm very fascinated by your amazing actually story of it, really.
I go to almost every week, if not every 2 weeks, I go to exhibitions. So I've just been in Helsinki this weekend. I had a show and a workshop, but actually I'd spent many hours going to exhibitions. I went to dance studios. I had a super busy weekend, but I go to as much as I can. I mean, visual arts are quite easy to consume in that way. You can see 8 to 10 shows a day. I go early. I go to the first gallery that opens at 10 and I walk around the entire city of London if in there and literally try and see as much as I can. And I have a list of all the dates of shows through to the middle of next year that are coming on so I know what to see.
Can we join you? Let's have a play date.
You're welcome to join me. Yeah, it's a lot of walking. It's good for your step count. You know, it's usually around 25 to 30,000 steps, so it's quite healthy. So
Well, that's so young.
exactly.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, I try to go to concerts. I try to go as much as possible, really, you know, within reason. I mean, one of the joys of making work that's public is that you get invited to other shows by other artists, but also sometimes I'm overseas for work. And then you get exposed to things you might not otherwise experience at home. Let it be a theatre show. I remember I was working in Berlin in 95, 96, and somebody said, Robert Wilson, the theatre director, is here in town. Would you like to go to the piece? It was just an opportunity to see a work by this extraordinary visionary theatre director who just passed away recently, but his work really came to London at that point in time. So it was absolutely amazing. So that's one of the joys of making the work that, you know, Martin has a similar opportunity. You can go to Venice and you can get to see things that other people don't necessarily get to see in London or Manchester or wherever it may be that you live.
Have you been to see the Barbican Sound exhibition?
No, I was thinking about it this weekend, but unfortunately I'd read some really poor
Oh
reviews.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think I understand. I mean, I think judging by the reviews, and these are from ordinary people, not professional reviewers. It sounds like exactly the sort of thing I would loathe, to be honest.
Yeah.
Which is too much crammed into a space that is probably the biggest criticism was the sound was leaking from every other part.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the challenges, yeah, with sound, you know, in any kind of gallery space, but also lots of the works are extremely dependent on new technologies that have failed by this point in the exhibition. So I've read many stories of people going and it just says out of order all around. And you think, yeah.
Worst thing. And I mean, having gone to lots of the art biennales in Venice and everything, it's a constant theme, you know. The more technological it is, the more obviously it'll break down. It just will. And then the problem is that the technicians that know all this specialized knowledge for this piece have already fucked off to Japan or what. So who's going to fix it? Yeah, quiet. Anyway,
Can I interject?
I don't know why it was for then. There was no need for that, wouldn't you?
No need.
Robin, what's been the most unexpected sound you've ever turned into music?
Good question. I mean, let's think about it. I mean, I'm not the first to do it, but one thing that always fascinated me were the words that we use in language. I've always been fascinated by, to start with, words we use such as to hold sentences together, you know, as pauses. I try not to go, and ah. I just pause, and I've taught myself to do that. But I really love words where you go like donc in French or allora, you know, like then. I like that. But probably one, just thinking, as I'm thinking aloud here, butterfly wings. I made a piece at the Hayward Gallery in London where I used the sounds of butterfly wings and used that as a soundtrack for a video installation. I worked with an Austrian artist, Katerina Matthiasek, and we made this work. We made a series of works together, and this was one of them. And it was shown in an exhibition curated by David Toop, British curator and musician. and it used amplified recordings of butterfly wings. And I love the idea of amplifying something that you could never otherwise hear. You know, it's a sound that's around us so much of the time, but you never get to hear it. And then probably the other one would be worms. I worked with an artist, Kasia, a couple of years ago, and we made a work where it was all about the soil. It was about how the soil is so important to our life. In fact, without good quality soil, we wouldn't be alive, to be quite honest. And it was looking at this and working with the farming community. And as part of the soundtrack, I wanted to record worms. So I built a wormery here in the studio. And behind me on the floor are still trails of worms that tried to escape at night. I had to bury a microphone into the body of the earth and then record them. And you get these amazing sounds of them moving around. And when their bodies cross one another, they go, you get this squeaking because they're quite moist and they pass each other and they make this squeaking noise. The thing you can't be is in the building when you're recording them, because they make the sound is so quiet that if I'm all the way at the bottom of the building and I close a door or I talk on my phone, it picks it up on the microphone because it's so sensitive. But worms and butterflies are probably two of the strangest.
Have you heard about this enormous hydrophone rig that I think it might be NASA is funding it. Anyway, it's somewhere off the coast of South America, in a part of the sea where humpback whales are.
Wow.
And so they built a hydrophone rig that is, I think, 5 miles long, so they can measure
Goodness.
not only the transition of everything, and they're using AI to record all the sounds of the sea, mainly whale song in this, and they're using AI to analyze the meaning of the recordings and see what the patterns are.
Wow.
To relate to the physical location of the whales. They're discovering some incredible things, and that they are, are we surprised how stupid we are as a race? That we are so arrogant and stupid that we believe there aren't any other creatures on Earth that are as smart as us. What a ridiculous notion.
Elephants are a good example. They discovered with elephants that they can follow a trail that's something like 100 kilometers distance between them, because they transmit through the ground these very, very low frequencies. So they've wondered for years how elephants follow these almost straight lines through the landscape. And it's because they can hear the other one 100 kilometers away and they know to go this way. I mean, it's mind-blowing. And there's a story of a woman who was very pregnant, and she was in one of those kind of zones where they're walking, and she could feel this physicality in her body and had no idea what it was, and thought, this isn't my child. This is something more, the monster coming through. No, not quite. But I love these kind of stories, they're quite revelatory of the world we're in. And I think that's what's magical about growing up, because you may not have heard that story 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And there's constant discoveries of where we're leading to and what we're learning.
I love it. It literally is a never ending story, isn't it?
Thing with dolphins, dolphins, ultrasound, sonar, that's dolphin technology. Arguably the most intelligent creatures on Earth, squids as well, octopuses.
So what is it? There's a current that runs around the Earth in the seas, which is like a super highway, and marine animals can ride on it and get transported quicker through the ocean and all that.
Yeah, it's in that film Finding Nemo. The turtles, all right.
Yeah, it's real. So they basically it carries sound as well. Insane distances, they're just realizing now. And of course that's very useful for meeting mates, and not your mate Sam photos.
Let's go for a pint, mate.
down near Papua New Guinea, And we're getting to the end of this. We could talk for hours. I didn't even mention, I should mention it, A Natural Romance, which
oh yes, yeah.
When we worked together, composed a piece based from mating calls of many different.
Yes, that was a fun one.
That was fantastic. I still use
Mating calls of what?
Of animals.
Yeah, I made a piece originally for BBC Radio for Valentine's Day, and they said to me, the BBC, foolishly, you can do what you like. So I went to Bristol to the archive, where the BBC archive at that time was, for all their animal recordings, and I spent a day or two going through all their old reel-to-reel recordings of animals, and they're extraordinary. I mean, you'd connect the tape up, you'd read the notes, and it would say mother seal cleaning baby seal, and then you press play, and then you hear. And part of you can't help but think, did they really go there, or are they just at home with a rubber band doing these?
Solely, yeah.
No, so I took but no, what I did ultimately, I took all recordings of animals having sex or mating calls, and then interviewed people about what is the sound of love to them, what does love sound like, and collage them together. So it's somebody talking about the snoring of their husband in bed and the vibrations as I play sounds of elephants mating and this kind of thing. So it's the sexiest, show the BBC have ever had without realizing it, I think.
It's basically porn.
Basically, yeah, animal porn. So
Animal sound porn.
Well, so transgressive. Bombshell. There is a couple of questions at the end that I'm asking everyone. So what's the most emotional moment in a composition that you can remember? One of them, like a kind of transcendentally beautiful transition, say, or is there anything that springs to mind?
By another composer, you mean, presumably?
Right.
I would almost immediately pick an extremely obscure piece of music, but you can hear it. It's a Russian film by Larissa Shepitko, who's one of my favorite filmmakers. She made three films and then died in a car crash, tragically. But the soundtrack by Alfred Schnittke is just, it reduces me. It's phenomenal. Wow. There's a shift in the soundtrack. There's a 10-minute documentary on her you can find online, just made about her. And there's this piece of music, and when it hits this moment, it just destroys me. It's phenomenal. It's really powerful.
Sort of thing I wanted, yeah.
Yeah.
And which is your favorite of your own work?
I don't listen to any of them. So I have a piece I made called, I've made too many records, and there's over 100 albums or so, but there's one called Wave of Light by Wave of Light by Wave of Light, but there's another one called The Signal of a Signal of a Signal. That's it, which is a good title, I think. And one side began as a 2-minute piece of music I wrote for Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands to open the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam many years ago. And it was for a dance piece, and it was 2-3 minutes long. And I thought, I like this, but it could be something else. So I put it through my nice synthetic modular synth system, and it helped me make this piece that's about 25 minutes long. It could be 25 hours long. And it's so rich and so beautiful and melancholic. I really love it. And it just rolls on. And it just, the harmonies keep appearing and disappearing. And it's almost beyond my control. And that's what I loved about it. I wrote this piece of music, put it into the system, so to speak. And then the system said to me, this is what it could sound like, Robin. And it just turned into this thing. And I'm still really proud of it.
And what's next for you?
I have next month I'm in Turin. I have a 16-speaker, 360-degree installation opening that runs for a couple of months with a Dutch artist. And then I have a new permanent work at the New London Museum, which opens, which will run for 25 to 30 years, apparently, which is over 40 speakers in the New London Museum.
Oh, fantastic.
And I like it because it's dealing with archives. It works with the London Museum's archive, interviews with people, recordings of London, archaic sounds, all kinds of things. But it just presents them all in this really amazing way. And a friend of mine, Peter Chilvers, is designing an amazing software system for it. Peter works with somebody called Brian Eno, some new kid on the block. And Peter's really great at building software systems. So he's built me this system for it to kind of work within. So that's coming up. And then I'm working on a soundtrack for a film for the Venice Biennale, which is incredible. It's a woolly mammoth was found in a block of ice. And all you can see are the tusks going through. And it's just sitting there. And as soon as this ice melts, this flesh will be as fresh as it was at the day it died 10, 20,000 years ago or whatever. It's in Siberia and you can't get there. But the woman I'm working with managed to get to this place with so many visa permissions, filmed inside the space, and I'm writing the soundtrack for it. So,
wow,
which is really amazing because there's almost nothing to see. It's this black film and there's kind of glimpses of ice and the tusks. It's really, really suggestive, and it's very dense and dark. And I'm writing a soundtrack that's kind of there and not there. It kind of appears and disappears. So it's really, really kind of spacious. So that's three of the things. You know, you're the same. Go on. Yeah, it kind of, it keeps me out of
I
trouble.
can't compete with you. You are a force of nature.
All on the same team then.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good team.
I'm sure people will want to know your website as well, scanner.com, is it?
It is. Yeah, it's a tricky one for people because it's scanner.com, but it's easy to find. Yeah.
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 So we must meet up soon. I'd love to see you, mate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's go to your opening party at the museum for this.
True. That's in the summer. Yeah, that's true. That would be fun.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right.
A real pleasure. Thank
Robin,
you.
Love you, man. See you later.
Thank you so much. Love
Thanks,
that.
guys.
Yeah.
Really sweet of you. Thank you. Bye.